as I was saying to before we started recording, we're going to read Avatar today. But before that, let's start with a message, and then we'll read a little about the book and the author. Yeah, Jai Baba. So, Mamaji, if you're comfortable, why don't you read,
Yes, yes. Okay.
please?
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet. Befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong, because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Hafiz. Hafiz.
Tar
Okay.
Meher Baba ki Jai. Thank you. Hafiz. Yeah, I'm also
Hafiz.
struggling to remember to pronounce it like that every time. Yeah, so the book we decided to read, the Saturday Heart book, the Saturday Heart book we're going to read is biographical. We have not read Lord Meher, we have not read anything biographical till now. So the book is Avatar. It's the life story of the perfect master Meher Baba. And this is the second edition in 1947, right? Now, before we go to that, let's just read a little, just to understand the context of who is Jean Adriel and a little more about her, right? So I'm just reading from the Meher Baba Travels website, where there are pages for key Mandali and key Western Baba lovers. So this is Jean Adriel. Uh, and this is a black and white picture that's rendered in color by Anthony Zoes. So she's born in 1892, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but then she moved on to live in France, right? And changed her name uh, due to numerology. So she changed it from her father's last name, Robinson, to Adriel, and then in later years she changed the spelling because she moved to France, right? So anyway, that's Jean, right? That's I think Malcolm Schloss, the husband. There are more pictures here. Um she was heavily involved in the first visit of Baba to New York, right? We'll read about that. And that's the house that Baba lived, Harmon on Hudson, in the first visit to the West, in the first visit to the US specifically, right? So this is the second visit, no, same visit, California, visit to California. More photographs. That's the house that Baba lived in. Okay, this is Anthony Zois. When I first heard Jean's name, I thought at once of Ariel, the spirit of Shakespeare in Tempest. There was an otherworldly, light and sparkling atmosphere around her, probably because she spent so much time in meditation and seclusion, especially in later years. Jean Robinson was born on September 21st, 1892. She later took the name Adriel through numerology. She grew up to be a tall, regal blonde with a pleasing voice. As a career, she took up social work in New York City. Later, she married the poet Malcolm Schloss, whom she met in his bookstore, the North Node in New York. Both were widely read in metaphysical subjects and earnestly seeking enlightenment. Through the bookstore, they made many contacts with spiritual seekers in the late 20s and early 30s. These proved invaluable to Baba's first visit to America. In 1931, very suddenly, through a young poet, Milo, a contact was established between the Schlosses and Meredith Starr, who told them a perfect master, Sri Meher Baba, was expected shortly in England. Jean and Malcolm were set to go when a cable came in which Baba asked them instead to make arrangements for his arrival in America. Through a friend, they obtained a lovely home on the Hudson at Harmon. This was Baba's headquarters for a month in November 1931. Jean writes in her book Avatar of her first meeting with him. My most outstanding impression of that first meeting is one of peering into bottomless pools of infinite love and tenderness. As my eyes met his, my heart pounded with tremendous excitement, and for a while I could not speak. I felt that in an inexplicable way, he was the reason for my very existence, that I have never really lived until this moment, that he was deeply familiar and precious to me, even as I was no stranger and very dear to him. This para, I think, appears in the back jacket or the back cover of the book, right? So, from the excerpt from the book, I think, if I remember, because the words are very familiar. Baba stayed a month at Harmon, meeting many individuals, contacts of the Schlosses, including Princess Machiavelli and Elizabeth Patterson. It was a time of intense unfoldment for both Malcolm and Jean. It took Malcolm, skeptical of the need for any outer masters, longer to surrender. 11 days, he reports. Baba named the American group Jeanco. It included the Schlosses, Elizabeth Patterson, Norina Machiavelli, Nadine Tolstoy, and Anita De Caro. He intimated they were all in his circle. Of course, Baba put Jean and Malcolm to the test. His usual test in those days, the swiftly changed plans, the so called broken promise. On his second visit to the West in 1932, many contacts had been made with the Hollywood film world. It was Jean who stood beside Baba at the Hotel Knickerbocker and introduced the screen luminaries to him, among many others. Baba left for China, promising to return and break his silence in the Hollywood Bowl, introduced over the radio by Mary Pickford. It's easy to smile now, but all took it seriously then. Expecting instant God realization, some even had elaborate dresses made. At least Norina got some use out of hers, all white. She used to lecture in it. Suddenly, Baba's plans to return to California were cancelled, leaving the Schlosses to face the music. Almost all the new contacts left, disillusioned, including two astrologers, Dane Rudyard and Mark Edmund Jones, in whose home Baba had stayed. Dane had cast Baba's horoscope and seen him as the great world teacher of the age. But the Schlosses were made of sterner stuff, as the cliche goes. They were called to Europe and took part in Baba's visits there, notably at Cannes. Jean, in poor health, was in seclusion and missed many of the outings with Baba. I recall one meditation Baba uh, just abruptly ends there. Uh, yeah. There are more photographs. So this is again background on the author, right? I think we can stop here and get to the book. Any thoughts? Okay, yeah, I think this one was interesting. I wanted to read this. This is a letter from Mehra on Jean's passing away on 16th of May 1984. Dearest Adil, dear Jean had been much in my thoughts recently. When we heard of her going to Baba, it was received with gladness, for Jean was more than ready to come home. In her journey through life, Jean was very fortunate to be holding on to Baba's daman. Baba was holding her hand and guiding her footsteps. This last phase of her life, in her illness and suffering, she had come very close to beloved Baba. We know that she is in bliss now, free from suffering, come home at last, happy to be where she has longed to be with beloved Baba always. You and Margaret Marge and many others of the LA Baba family helped and cheered dear Jean with your visits to her, enabling her to talk of Baba and hear his name. On 23rd May, when we visit Mehrabad, we will offer a garland at beloved Baba's Samadhi in salutation of Jean's love and service. Through her and her writings, so many had heard of Baba and come to him. Hope dear Phyllis's health is improving and she's getting strong by day by Baba's grace. Much love to dear Phyllis and you, dear Adil, from your Mehrazad family in beloved's all encompassing love. So there are some more notes. There's some more photographs. This must be Pune, I think.
This is Nasik.
Nasik, yeah, you're right. There it says.
Should be Nasik.
Yeah.
Karthik, the venue before on the photograph before this, there was a colored photograph.
Yeah. I don't know.
They have been redone actually by some
Yeah,
artists.
but venue is not known. It could be actually, it looks very neutral. It could be Mahabaleshwar or it could be US or Europe.
Yeah.
Well, the bricks give it away. I think it's India mostly.
Mm-hmm. There's something written on below the photograph.
Yeah, it doesn't mention the place. It just
Oh.
says image rendition. Yeah.
Okay.
And here it says MSI collection. Yeah. This is playing with a pet. Jean watching Rano. Jean is here. Yeah. This is also Nasik, is it? Oh, lovely. Nasik is beautiful.
See, Nasik, see, Baba had invited all these Westerners, especially all these ladies, the 3-4 ladies that we talked, Norina Pattinson, Nadine Tolstoy, Jean Adriel, and all these girls, so to say, stayed in the first floor of the Meher retreat. And that retreat got ready only by 1938, if you can see the number written there, the year written there. And then all these ladies and some Westerners were also invited later to Nasik. That place, I had a opportunity to have a look. These are the rooms, and Baba had specifically made arrangements for them to be comfortable as they are in their own countries. So I think this book is going to give us a lot of insights into those earlier years of these Western women who were, surrendered themselves so completely to Baba. And, if just to add, is the Nadine Tolstoy story is coming up in a book. And the latest Glow has covered Nadine Tolstoy's life in some 18 pages. Half the Glow publication this time is on her. So anybody who gets it will be interested to read. So you get the these all these Western ladies references in that her own journey. Yeah, Baba.
Thank you. Again, credit where it is due. Sanjay ji proposed this book long back when we were looking for book candidates for reading. So finally we get to it. Thank you for that suggestion and input. Yeah, Ashok.
Yeah. If I may add, there is a replica of the Samadhi in Nasik. One of the Baba lovers has built it.
Correct.
Just information.
Yeah. So this is the actual cover of the book. First one, 1947 hardcover, which was the trend back in those days. Then you had this leather calico, whatever, fancy one, and the second printing. And this is the soft cover in the third printing and up to the fifth one. Yeah, this is another book that she's authored, Soaring Sunbirds, Woman's Intuition, 1961. Yeah, this is the back page of that book. Okay, this is just, ships and stuff. Okay, I think we can now get to the book itself. Any thoughts?
Jai Meher Baba. Jai Meher
Jai
Baba.
Baba. Jai Baba.
Hi. Hi, Karthik. This is one of my favorite books. This book has, it is inspirational to many
Mm-hmm.
of us. And if you know, PIMCO has come from this, they have a group of five people. So there is a big journey with this. There are many Westerners who come through this book to Baba. And she was the only one probably who discussed about spirituality and her experiences in this book. This is not a biography, but it's her experiences with Baba and her
Mm-hmm.
journey. It's all about her journey,
Yeah.
and it's not to be missed. Yeah, it's really beautiful, beautiful book.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank
saying
you for
it's not a biography. You're right. It more gives a glimpse of Baba's life at that
yes,
time, but
yes.
it's not like
It's her
it's not a biography.
interpretation. It's her
Correct.
insight. It's her spiritual, awakenings with Baba, and it's her journey. It's about all about her journey.
Yes. Okay, so let's get started. Any volunteers to who want to read for some time? Ashok ji, you want to read?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Sanjay ji, why don't you start? Next round, Ashok. So we'll start with the dedication. Kabir.
Yeah. When you meet the true Guru, he will awaken your heart. He will tell you the secret of love and detachment. And then you will know indeed that he transcends this universe. He comes to the path of the infinite, on whom the grace of the Lord descends. He is freed from birth and death who attains to him. Kabir. It is my part in the divine plan to bring to the weary world a fresh dispensation of eternal love. Avatar, the life story of the perfect master Meher Baba, a narrative of spiritual experience by Jean Adriel. Adriel, sorry.
Yeah.
1947, J.F. Brownie Press, Santa Barbara, California.
Oh, so she lived in Ohio too. Yeah. Okay, this is just a legal disclaimer. We can get to the. Oh, there's another
Yeah.
dedication.
The living Christ, whose beauty the very heavens cannot contain, but whose presence may be found in every humble, loving heart. I wish to express my deep indebtedness to all those devotees, Eastern and Western, whose letters, diaries, and articles appearing in the Meher Baba Journal I have drawn upon for much of the material in this biography of the Master. Okay.
Okay. Preface.
Yeah. When Meher Baba told me in India to spend most of my time meditating upon him and writing down the fruits of my meditation, I little thought that they would find their way into print. It was not, in fact, until I had been back in America for about 4 years that the book Avatar began to take its present form. I had spent a couple of weeks at a psychological seminar conducted by Dr. Fritz Kunkel, the renowned psychiatrist. I had been it had been a most inspiring and revealing fortnight, which for me had had the effect of not only helping me to understand better my own particular problems, but it had given me profound insight into many of the more puzzling aspects of Baba's technique with his disciples. Only one other member of the group had any interest in Baba, so I was compelled to keep my new insights largely to myself, but I recorded them all in my notebook. As our stay drew to a close, I felt greatly quickened by the creative forces which had been released as the leader. Dr. Kunkel unfolded for us the dynamic possibilities inherent in the right understanding and application of introversion, which had been the subject of the seminar. That's a new word. Yeah. He suggested that whatever life bearing seeds had been sown during those weeks should be given the opportunity to mature, not and bear fruit. They should find outlet in some form of creative expression, which would a totality, symbolize a totally new way of life. One of his concrete suggestions had been to write out our life stories as a means of starting the creative flow. I considered his advice earnestly for some days. I finally came to the conclusion that the most fruitful course for me would be to write the life story of my master, Meher Baba, as I knew, with particular emphasis upon my own experiences with him. As I reviewed my own life, intensely colorful and dramatic in the spiritual sense, I knew that it derived all its significance from Baba, that it had for many years, even prior to my meeting him, drawn his very momentum from his inspiration. Avatar is therefore a story within a story, a life within a life, as the disciple's life must inevitably be be hidden within the master's. Wow, beautiful expression here.
Yeah.
About 10 years have passed since the disciple in India was instructed to write down whatever came to her. I shall be the force behind you, the master had said. Now, as the book is finished, word has come from him that he places his blessings upon it and it given to the world, wishes it given to the world. In anticipation of his coming again to America, a center has been established for him in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina and on the west coast in the upper Ojai Valley. A beautiful place, Meher Mount awaits him. It is before Baba went there. Yeah. Meher Mount, Upper Ojai, California, September 1, 1946. So Baba went to there on 1952. First visit. So it's
Yes,
6 years
first
before.
visit.
Yeah. So that means it was in kind of in consideration or what, in under construction or whatever for many years.
Yeah, Agnes Barron and her struggle in getting the place together.
Mm.
Yeah, there was a
Yes.
school teacher, follower of Baba. And by the way, this is pronounced Ojai. It's this Spanish thing.
Okay.
J becomes
Okay.
ha. Yeah, ha sound. Yeah.
Oh, hi.
But it's that
Okay.
that whole town, Ojai, is full of spiritual masters and their retreats. So everybody
Mm-hmm.
from Paramahamsa Yogananda to Deepak Chopra to Oprah Winfrey to everybody. I mean, it's very fancy. It's a very, very fancy place. All of them have their retreats uh, alongside and around Meher Mount. And Meher Mount itself is absolutely beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. And I think on this call
Okay.
we have Sunil, and Nomita who've been there, so I'm sure they agree. Okay, let's
Okay.
go to the first chapter. Yeah.
Chapter 1, Soul Awakening. N-I-N-G. One N is missing. Okay. Though I was not consciously seeking a spiritual master, I was seeking that a spiritual fulfillment, which had been the passionate longing for my soul for many years when the master Meher Baba first came into my life. When I was 21, though a priest, through a priest of the Anglican Church, I had been initiated into kingdom of reality. This spiritual awakening had precipitated a state of consciousness in which all my senses were suddenly merged into one unpremeditated awareness of a transcendent presence. Unpremeditated awareness of a transcendent presence, which permeated every atom of space and quickened the whole of life with its sublime beauty. Human beings, trees, flowers, and even the concrete of the pavement upon which I walked were radiant with an unearthly light. The most sordid surroundings were enhanced by the inner glow of what I knew to be the presence of God. I knew this because this presence had been awakened within my heart. Wow, very powerful English.
Yeah. I'm reminded of C.D. Deshmukh. By the way, I bought a C.D. Deshmukh book I'm reading. It's very interesting. I was reading about his biography too. We all have read so much about. I mean, read so much of his writing, but we know very little about him. So I'll probably scan a few pages of his biographical sketch and send it out on the group. And so
Okay.
he's the one that's largely written most of the text for discourses and God speaks, right? And his style is what we have got used to, or what we also feel irritated about with the verbosity and the choice of words. But he's such a nice soul. I'll send you the details.
Yeah. Yeah. For a period of many months following the initial experience, this blissful consciousness remained with me. Then, through bitter delusionment of the bewildered state of mind which it induced, I lost the highlighted awareness.
Heightened.
For long, yeah, highlighted awareness.
No, no,
For
heightened,
long,
heightened, heightened.
heightened awareness. Okay, high level of awareness. For long years, I searched with heavy heart for the key to spiritual joy and peace. Because I shared with many others the conviction that spiritual guidance must henceforth come from within. My search consisted in those practices of meditation and self awareness which seemed most likely to to reestablish the celestial joy. I was of the opinion that to depend upon any outside source would only postpone the consummation which my soul sought union with the God self. Okay, let me read the last sentence again. I was of the opinion that to depend upon any outside source would only postpone the consummation which my soul sought, that is, union with the God self. Now, with deeper understanding, I have become aware that life is an indivisible whole, and that what we call outer is also a part of, is but the objectification of inner processes. The spiritual guide is the visible answer to the soul's inner call. Once during the period, as I sat in the dentist's chair inhaling nitrous oxide gas, I lost consciousness for a moment, and in that brief interval, I again recaptured the awareness which transcends three-dimensional existence. Before my inner sight, a cosmic panorama of creation, life, death, and man's ultimate destiny was revealed. The sorrows and problems of my own earth life, which had weighed heavily upon my spiritual shoulders, slid easily from me. I was free. The limitations of the finite mind had vanished, but the power of directed will, I soared high into space until I reached a sunlit mountain top. Then I looked down into the vast valley below me. Three, there milled the children of earth, and and though they were enveloped in gloomy shadow, and I seemed miles above them, I saw their features with startling clarity. For the most part, that movements seemed aimless, but here and there one would strike out on an uncharted course, and soon others would break away from the human vortex to follow the trailblazers. So never postpone a dentist appointment.
Good one. The most dreaded one of all.
Yeah. I watched these adventurous pilgrims on their lonely way at the wide base of the mountain. As they advanced in their climb, they were confronted by the tremendous hazards. Discouraged by the initial hardships, terrified by the greater ones ahead, the faint hearted dropped back into the maelstrom of earth. Others, more resolute, designed a slow spiral course upwards, while a few, very few, climbed steadily to the summit in an. Oh, I am getting a call. I have to drop it.
Okay, I'll continue. In
Yeah.
an almost undeviating line, I'll start again from the beginning of that sentence. Others, more resolute, designed a slow spiral course upward, while a few, very few, climbed steadily to the summit in an almost undeviating line. As they reached the pinnacle of the great mountain, I witnessed the joyous meeting of kindred souls in search of the same supreme objective. No word was spoken between these comrades. No word was needed. Here, thought, under the impulse of love, communicated itself without speech. Here was the meeting ground of the soul with its maker, the one whom we call God. By a process of inner unfolding, I was made to understand that this one lives in all things and beings, yet is independent of his creation. It is union with this one which lovers seek in their beloveds. It is the power of this one which the conquerors of earth would as would assume. Okay. On It is union with this one which lovers seek in their beloveds. It is the power of this one which the conquerors of earth would assume. It is the knowledge of this one which the wise ones of earth have ever proclaimed. It is the peace and joy of this one which the saints of all ages and religions have sought and found. As I became aware of my union with this one, there unfurled within my consciousness the pattern of creation. I saw, in space, a point of light whirling with terrifying velocity, and from within its rotation, stars, planets, worlds take form. Light and darkness balanced each other. In the midst of chaos, order was being established. Then I felt within myself the consciousness of evolving life, so dense in the mineral, so delicate in the flower, so fierce in the wild animal. I could feel the slender pain, the dim awareness, the heavy ferocity which these lower forms of life experience, and I recognized these slower life tremors as constituents of my own soul, with its more complex joys and sorrows. Never again could I deny to any aspect of God's creation its own particular awareness, nor could I exclude any emotion from the symphony of life. It was revealed to me of what little moment were my sins, how equally important my virtues. I saw clearly that good and evil are simply manifested aspects of this transitory life, while God, in essence, is beyond all opposites. This tremendous reality was not concerned with my petty world concept of vice and virtue. Be spontaneous, wholly unfettered in response to life, was the burden of the message, with this one in a thunderous yet still voice spoke within me. I revealed kaleidoscopically how, through many lives of pain and joy, the soul in me, which was one with the soul of all and one with this soul supreme, had developed its capacity for conscious selfhood. It showed how many phases of tension and release had been necessary to weave for my individualized spirit a strong and resilient garment, and how, when this was ultimately achieved, after the saturation point of earth experience had been reached, my soul would be ready for the final evolutionary step, conscious reunion with God. This one far off divine event, which the poets of all time have proclaimed, I now experienced. In a tidal wave of ecstasy, the final remnant of my lesser self was engulfed in union with the Oversoul. For a timeless moment, I was that one. My individuality was not lost, merely raised to the infinite proportions of God, endowed with His infinite capacities. Out, out into an eternal future, back into an ageless past, both blended in a dimensionless present. I saw worlds being formed, worlds being destroyed, an infinite game being played by an infinite God who, even in pain, perpetually enjoyed the imperishable bliss of his creation. For an eternal moment, the dental chair had become my stratoplane into infinity. Wow. So I continue. This vivid glimpse of reality naturally left me with the inspiration and incentive to integrate as much as possible its transcendental wisdom into my conscious life. Again, some years later, a door opened which admitted me for a few brief weeks to another intensified experience of expanded consciousness. All mind activity was utterly stilled by an ecstasy which almost consumed me. Like fire, this heightened vibration poured through my body and soul. In fact, there seemed no longer to be any cleavage between physical and spiritual. The inner faculties of clairvoyance, clairsentience, and levitation were awakened. One sunny morning, in walking through Central Park, just off Fifth Avenue, I found myself rising about 4 feet from the ground and floating down the pathway with great freedom and joy until some people approaching at a distance caused me to pull myself down to earth again. I had no desire to become the object of sensational publicity. A future was revealed to me in which this expanded consciousness would be the norm for many people. I understood how discord and war would automatically disappear when these qualities of universal love and joy, which then poured through me, were released in the soul of man. I perceived how unpossessive would be the relationships of that future day, how one would be able to retain the physical body as long as one desired to remain in it, and how the untrammeled spirit of man would constantly recreate life in a vehicle in which there would be no mental, emotional, or physical strain to disintegrate it. It was also revealed to me how destructive to the finer vibrations of the spirit are the dissecting, separative, and corroding propensities of the analytical mind when it lacks the synthesizing faculty of the heart. After a month, alas, this intensified awareness too abated. Painful as it was to continue living without it, I knew well that what had to be accomplished before I could regain and maintain it as permanent state of consciousness. The experience had been induced by meditation on the resurrection of the body, and I was shown very clearly that before the body could sustain such a swift rate of vibration, every cell must be cleansed, attuned to the newly released power, the egoistic mind stilled, the restless emotions purified. Every fiber of the body, every cranny of the mind had literally to be reconditioned in order to house permanently this exalted state of consciousness. The experience left me with a fragment of that radiant life force, which had permeated it, to be used whenever the need became acute. The deep peace and causeless joy vanished, however, leaving me with a greatly augmented yearning for God. To have once experienced the inner life of the kingdom is to become a God addict. No physical nor mental pleasure, no earthly delight can ever satisfy the hunger of the soul which has once tasted God, though all human joy is infinitely enhanced by the divine afflatus. During the succeeding 2 years, I continued my inward search in company with a dear comrade, my former husband, Malcolm Schloss, while trying to help him keep our metaphysical center, the North Node bookshop in New York, from financial failure. The events which followed its ultimate collapse form an important segment in the story of meeting the master, and the reason for its loss became apparent. But at the time, its failure was difficulty to understand, hard to accept. One day, in those last strenuous weeks, a stranger came into the bookshop. After talking with Malcolm and buying a volume of his mystical poems, Songs to Celebrate the Sun, the man left with a letter he had recently received from an Englishman in which he described his spiritual retreat in Devonshire. The stranger intended to send the purchased copy of Malcolm's poems to this Englishman, also a poet. Under the pressure of last-minute attempts to revive the failing life of the shop, Malcolm had put the letter aside, forgetting its existence, until one evening, seeing it on his desk, I picked it up and read it. I felt excited by the strange and moving power which seemed to pour through the words. "There is something in this letter for us," I exclaimed to him. "Let me read it to you." As I read, I sensed that this power came not from the pen of the writer, but from some source beyond it. I was not, therefore, surprised to learn from Malcolm that the Englishman had spent 6 months in India with a spiritual master, and at his suggestion had established the retreat in England to prepare the way for him when he should decide to make his first visit to the Western world. Yeah, Nehaji.
It's such a beautiful line that she realized that the power is not coming from the pen, but the original source. What is that? Just read it again.
As I read, I sensed that this power came not from the pen of the writer, but from some source beyond it. So what she's reading.
My God, so intuitive, so intuitive. My God.
Yeah. So she's reading a letter. I'm wondering whose letter it was. It's obviously a male prominent Baba lover in England. No, in
Oh.
England. So because it's Devonshire, but I don't know who it is. Wonder who it is.
It must be
No, no, I
mentioned
think it
ahead.
was Baba's
Just read
letter. It was Baba's letter.
It was
Yeah.
Baba's letter? No, I
what was
think
it? Just read it again ahead.
I'll read it again. The man
But
left
so
with him a letter he had recently received from an Englishman. It's a letter from an Englishman,
Okay.
right? So, and it talks about a retreat in which he described the spiritual retreat in Devonshire. So it can't be Don Stevens because he was then
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the US. He was in the US then. So it has to be somebody, I don't know who the British uh, male lovers were at that time. The name will crop up soon. So, okay, I'll just read from that last paragraph. As I read, I sensed that this power came not from the pen of the writer, but from some source beyond it. I was not, therefore, surprised to learn from Malcolm that the Englishman had spent 6 months in India with a spiritual master and, at his suggestion, had established the retreat in England to prepare the way for him when he should decide to make his first visit to the Western world. Bankruptcy and bounty. The swiftly moving events of the next weeks drove the letter from our immediate consciousness. The financial pressure of the previous months had made it impossible for us to meet the rent for our small apartment, which was situated in the same hotel as our bookshop. Upon returning from a Decoration Day weekend, which we had spent with friends outside of New York, we found ourselves locked out of our rooms and all our belongings confiscated. Our total remaining possessions amounted to something around $2.50, and the clothes which we had taken along in our weekend bags. The bankruptcy sale was to take place within a few days, so there was no hope for any financial help from the sale of books. Malcolm moved in with his family, and I went to the apartment of my friend, Princess Norina Machabelli. Gradually, as other friends learned of our predicament, gifts of money and clothing came to us. After adjustment to the first shock of finding ourselves without funds and homeless, we rose to the potentialities of adventure in our acute situation. We realized that an old chapter was finished, and rather eagerly, joyfully, we turned the page to find it bright with prospects for a pleasant vacation. We were invited to spend the summer with a group of friends on a large farm in New Hampshire. When the day finally came for our departure, we had all that we needed in the way of summer clothing. We had paid for our transportation and had $6.32 left over for summer spending money. We welcomed the healing peace of the open country after the turmoil of the last weeks in New York. Malcolm particularly needed the refreshment which pine-laden air, unadulterated sunshine, and still nights could give him after the drastic operation of having his bookshop taken from him. So, for a summer, we lived the life of slightly animated vegetables with very little work, intermittent play, and regular intervals of meditation. Only one member of the group seemed able to take himself seriously enough to write. The rest of us lazed in the sun, swam in the stream, read or meditated under the pines, and ate the good vegetarian food which we raised in our own garden and prepared ourselves. Incidentally, we learned a little about group life, its advantages and difficulties, and two of us at least looked forward to the day when we might have a permanent place in the country which we could share with with like-minded friends who would care to explore with us the hidden treasures of the inner kingdom. I pause here, and also we could rotate reading, but um, I think thank you, Sanjay ji, for reading. I jumped in to step in. Who wants to go next? Nomita ji, you want to read? If you're able to read, it would be
If
good.
Nomita ji wants to read next, I could do.
Yeah, I saw you dropping off, so I was not sure. So
No,
I thought maybe.
There's some.
I let Ashok ji read, please. I'm painting also on the side.
Okay, so
Thank you.
over to you, Ashokji, if you're okay. New threads.
Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Jay.
New threads. Into this placid sylvan life came one afternoon a curious message. A friend at the nearby McDowell colony telephoned to say that she would like to bring Milo over for a visit. Milo was a Harvard graduate who had arrived from England, where for the past year he had lived in a spiritual retreat. The head of the retreat, the same Englishman whose letter so deeply stirred me some weeks before, had sent this young poet to America on a mission, the purpose of which he had not revealed to Milo. Our friend seemed, however, quite certain that the purpose was to contact Malcolm and me. This amused us, but we were quite naturally interested in meeting Milo and hearing firsthand of his experience at the English retreat. The next afternoon, they arrived for tea, and it so happened that all the other members of our group family were in Boston that day. We plied with Milo with all the questions which had been accumulating in our minds, especially concerning the master from India. And we learned that this master, Baba, as he is familiarly called, was expected that autumn in England on his first visit to the West. As we spoke of him, I felt my inner life quickening into flame. My heart burned within me. I felt I was in the presence of mystery and power. The master himself might have been in the room with us. So close he seemed, so strong and direct the current which flowed through me as my thoughts and questions turned toward him. Intuitively, I felt that Meredith Starr, the Englishman of whom Milo spoke, was merely a relaying station for the vibrations of the master. But even a transmitter of such transcendent power might be the means of preparing the way for a meeting with the master. So at the end of the poet's visit, we were already turning our minds towards England and Devonshire retreat. A few days later, Milo came again to say goodbye. He had just received a cable from England summoning him to return. Apparently, the purpose of his visit to America had been accomplished. He left us with a brochure describing the English retreat, in which prospective visitors were asked to write a brief outline of their experiences and spiritual aspirations. Since Malcolm's mystical poems in themselves indices of his ideals and inner experience had by this time reached Devonshire, I wrote the required letter to England and expressed the hope that someday we might be able to visit the retreat. Karthik, I take a pause. I just want just got reminded that Baba has said that if there are more than I think 2 or 3 or 5 people assembled in my memory, my presence is there. I mean, this is of
Yes.
course just something which came to my mind. Sharing. Uh, Continuing, we were just about to settle down again to our Bowen life when a book of Meredith Starr's poems arrived from England for Malcolm. Most of them had been written by Starr while he was in India with the master. What does Bowen life mean?
I'm surprised. Bovine means anything to do with cows. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
they
she's
bore.
referring to the country life, given that she's in that retreat in New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah, yes, possible. Continuing, they bore the imprint of that experience and conveyed to much of the master's love and power that when we read them to the group under a large apple tree at sundown, I had difficulty in holding my consciousness in my body. Certainly, this man, Baba, who through the medium of another's words could so tremendously quicken one's spirit was no ordinary man. Also, I discovered that whenever Malcolm and I spoke of him, as we invariably did in the afternoon rest period, the same quickening took place within me. In exactly the length of time required for a letter to reach England and for us to receive a reply, our answer came from Meredith Starr. It was a cordial response, inviting us to come whenever we could, emphasizing that we were destined to come the way would open up for us as he felt certain it would.
So the person is Meredith Starr, the Englishman who wrote the letter about Devonshire, is Meredith Starr, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Fed by ravens, simultaneously with the receipt of his letter began a series of miraculous manifestations of bounty. In the same mail with Star's letter came another from England for one of our group, from someone who had wished to remain anonymous, in which was enclosed $50 for Malcolm and me. A day or so later, our friend Julian Lamar came up to spend the weekend with us and, on departing, left us $25, apologizing that it was so little. Another friend sent me the same amount by mail, and the two of our group gave us $30. Then came a letter from a friend who had moved to the Isle of Jersey and had only recently heard of the bookshop's bankruptcy. He regretted his inability to help much, but suggested that a large collection of old and rare books which he had sent us on consignment might be sold and the proceeds kept for our needs. By this time, we felt like a couple of Alices in Wonderland and believed anything was possible, and indeed it was. For in the next meal, as if in answer to our question as to how we could dispose of the books, came a forwarded letter from a friend who had not heard of the bookshop's closing. Believing us to be sweltering in the heat of New York summer, he invited us to spend a long weekend with him at his place in the country. In reply, we told him of our hoped for trip to England and our need for a place in New York to display the books. 2 days later, we received a telegram from him cordially offering his house in the city, telling us where we would find the key. It was the first week in September when we made the trip back to New York, our hearts exultant with new joy. I had written Star that we were helping to leave for England soon, and in reply, received word that the master, Shri Meher Baba, was expected in England within a few weeks. This news naturally gave fresh impetus to our efforts in selling the books. Malcolm contacted prospective buyers, and again money began pouring in. Topping the whole amazing series of events was the notice I received on my birthday, September 21st, from a New York bank informing me of a $100 draft on a London bank from an anonymous sender which it was holding for me. We suspected that this new gift came from the same source as the $50 which we had received while we were in Hampshire, and later, when we discovered the donor's identity, our supposition was confirmed. Thomas A. Watson was our nameless benefactor. We had met him in New York a few days after the Raven days. He was a man well past 70, with a heart as young and responsive as that of unspoiled youth. At the inception of his career, he had collaborated with Alexander Graham Bell in the invention and manufacture of the telephone, and throughout his long and helpful life, he had been alert to creative ideas and processes which would help mankind to a higher, more God-inspired life. What he advocated for others, he had demonstrated in his own life. So, so responsive did he remain to new inspirations that when he was well past 60, he went to England to study acting as a member of a Shakespearean road company, with which he traveled for several years through rural England. Not many years before we met him, he had taken up painting. In this field too, he had manifested unusual ability. One of his many proteges was Milo, the young poet who had visited us during the summer. Through him, Mr. Watson had heard about the English retreat and Baba's impending visit there. Feeling drawn by the reports he had heard of the master, he arranged his summer itinerary to include a trip to Devonshire. When we met him, he related to us the unique story of his meeting with Baba. He had one night, I'll read again. He had retired one night at the retreat, sharing with many others the anticipation of Baba's arrival the next day. When he awakened early in the morning, he found his pillow wet with unaccustomed tears, which were still streaming from his eyes, and in his heart was an indescribable joy. He stood before his open window and pondered for a while as his eyes feasted on the peaceful beauty of the Devonshire countryside. What was the meaning of this strange phenomenon of tears, this profound, this profound spontaneous joy? As he
Yeah, I
spoke,
mean, tears
sorry,
are something that a lot of people experience when they make their initial contact the with
Yeah,
Baba.
but
Uh,
this time it was during sleep.
Correct.
Normally, when we are awake, even I had this experience. My earlier pictures would show, but this was during the sleep. So
Yeah.
beautiful.
yeah, as I had mentioned, even during Amar Tithi, between 12 and 12:15, when my eyes were shut, it was filled with moisture. Anyway, it does happen.
Lovely.
As he probed for the answer, he felt a gentle hand upon his shoulder. The touch of that hand, the eyes of the master smiling into his as he turned around, brought to him at last the knowledge of that love of God for which he had been searching most of his life. Waves of ecstasy and light poured through his being, as I think it should be through his being. As the
Yes.
flood, as the floodgates of his heart opened and suffused his eyes with a fresh deluge of tears. In the core of his being, he knew that his meeting with Baba was the culmination of his quest for the living truth. Later, later during the day, he had heard through Meredith Star that he had shown Baba the letter in which I had described my spiritual experiences and aspirations and expressed the hope that Malcolm and I might visit the retreat. Baba's instant reaction was that Malcolm and I were his own and that meeting us was essential. It was this declaration of the master which had inspired dear Thomas Watson to send us the two anonymous gifts of money toward our passage to England. His heart and hand were always ready to help, his generosity ever gracious. At the time of our meeting with Mr. Watson, we had already secured our passports and were about to make reservations, I think.
So
For
this man who slept in the retreat and had this tears experience was Mr. Watson.
Yes.
Yeah, and he
Yes. Yes.
worked with Graham Bell, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Thomas A. Watson. Okay.
Thomas A. Watson.
That's interesting. Is it the same person who invented the lamp?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Correct.
Wow. For sailing the middle of October, when we received a cable from Star to defer our visit to England as he and the master's party were coming to America. During this period of eager waiting, we received numerous cables, first of which asked us if we could accommodate the party for a week. Thrilled by the prospect of acting as host to the master, we decided to use the passage money for the purpose. I got in touch with a friend from whom we had once rented a furnished studio at Harmon on the Hudson. In reply to my letter, in which I revealed the identity of our illustrious visitor, she responded with a gracious offer of her beautiful Greystone house, high among the trees which overhung the Croton River, as a contribution to the entertainment of the master and his retinue. The day before leaving for Harmon to prepare the house for the great event, I spent the afternoon with my friend Norina Machabili, who had just returned to town. I had written her of our prospective plans, first of our hope of going to England, later of Baba's impending visit to America. With searing sarcasm, but more than usual emotion restraint, Norina pried me with questions and wound up asking, "Who is this master at whose feet you worship?" I tried to convey to her the little I had heard and read about Baba and abundance my heart had told me. She listened for 10 minutes, then pacing back and forth the length of the living room, she upbraided me.
So it shows that Norina came to Baba through
Through
Jean.
Jean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. This we are talking in 1931,
correct.
Baba's first visit, Devonshire. Yeah.
How can you worship at the feet of any man, even though he calls himself a master? Women like ourselves, who have had such deep inner experience, need no man to show us the way to God. How can you allow yourself to be drawn into such foolishness? I waited until the torrent of her disapproval had done its course. Then quietly I told her that I strongly impelled to follow my one inner prompting, which I knew to be the deepest intuition of my life. One of the things I had told Norina about Baba was the extraordinary phenomenon of tears which Mr. Watson and many others had experienced upon first meeting the master. So, as I bid her goodbye, she laughingly remarked,
Yeah, I just read about Mr. Watson. The Wikipedia says he was a carpenter
Uh-huh.
and who took up some job at Boston, where Graham
Okay.
Bell himself was a professor.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Watson got hired by Graham Bell to assist him. And the status it shows Thomas A. Watson, inventor.
Hmm. Interesting.
So, yeah, see what.
Thanks for that research. Yeah.
"Yeah, indeed. Well, when our master arrives, I must meet him. I too would like to weep. The master comes. The next few weeks were busy ones, setting in order the Greystone house, with the red window trimmings and doors for our visitors from abroad, Meher Baba, two Indian disciples, Ali and Chanji, and Merit Star. Also as guests were our five friends who had been with us in New Hampshire. No work ever seemed more joyous, more exhilarating. Yet, due to a rather frail body, I had little strength when the preparations were finally completed. Baba was scheduled to land in New York on the 6th of November. The night before, as I lay in bed, exhausted, wondering how I could muster sufficient strength to fill my role as cook and housekeeper for 11 people. I suddenly had the impression of my room being filled with light. The next moment, there streamed into through the walls and ceiling a host of angelic beings singing celestial music, the beauty of which is indescribable. In the center of the white clad figures, I recognized the form and features of the priest, now deceased, who had first initiated me into the life of the Spirit 16 years before. At that time, he had predicted that many years hence I would have an important part to play in what he described as the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Now, as I saw him in this waking vision, he smiled at me and said, "This, Jean, is the moment I predicted many years ago." Then the heavenly messengers gradually faded. I fell into a happy, restful sleep. The next evening, as one of our friends stood in the kitchen with me, peering through the kitchen window into the silent darkness of the wooded road that led to the house, the headlights of a car appeared in the distance, and we knew our long anticipated visitor was approaching. My husband and most of our friends had driven 3 cars into New York that morning to meet the boat and provide transportation for the party and their luggage. For us, who had stayed behind, it had been a day crowded with the last minute preparations, electric with eager expectancy. Now the great moment was at hand. I walked to the small courtyard upon which the doorway opened and lit the hanging lantern that then stood in the passageway, waiting. The cars pulled into the driveway. Meredith Starr got out first and came forward with outstretched hand. I returned his greeting, but my eyes were on the master, who was directly behind him, looking into me with a deeply knowing smile. How long this his eyes embraced me, I do not know, but at some moment Meredith's voice recalled me to temporal surroundings. Jean, this is Sri Meher Baba. My most my most outstanding impression of that first meeting is one of peering into bottomless pools of infinite love and tenderness as my eyes met him. My heart pounded with tremendous excitement, and for a while I could not speak. I felt that in an inexplicable way he was the reason for my very existence, that I had never really lived until this moment, that he was deeply familiar and precious to me, even as I was no stranger and very dear to him. "I'm so happy you have come," I finally managed to say. Hearing myself say it, I felt acutely the inadequacy of this greeting from one who had just experienced the merging of time and space into fathomless eternity, in which the cosmic drama portraying God was again being cast with the age old characters reliving their ordained parts.
Could you please read this again?
Yes, Nehaji, I also felt that I should
It's
read the.
beautiful.
Yes,
I really, I had never really lived before or something
Yeah.
like that. Very
yes,
beautiful, very profound.
yes.
Could you please
I,
read this last three, four lines again?
I'll read the whole paragraph again. Karthik is.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
I'm so
Please.
Thank you.
happy you have come. I'm so happy you have come. I finally
Oh,
managed to say, hearing myself it
Jai
I
Baba.
accurately. I felt acutely the inadequacy of this greeting from one who had just experienced the merging of time and space into fathomless eternity, in which the cosmic drama portraying God was again being cast with the age old characters reliving their ordained parts. Here I am impelled to put on record something to which the Western reader may savor of sacrilege or childish fantasy. From my earliest childhood, I had always felt I would someday meet the Savior in the flesh. I remember that it came to me first when I was about 4 years old and attended a Sunday infant school where he sang the children hymn. I think when I read that sweet story of old, how Jesus was there among men, how he called little children like lambs to his fold. I wish I had been with him then.
Ashokji,
I
you're good to continue, or you want to rotate? We can have one last reader. Sunil, Ashish, anyone?
absolutely
Mamaji?
anybody else can if he wants to read. I can continue, but I would love to give it to somebody who wants.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I can try.
Okay, I will try. Okay.
Okay, Mamaji, please.
Ah,
Okay, Baba.
I remember the ecstasy with which I entered into the emotional longing of the hymn, then the vivid certainty that I had been with him then and I would be with him again. This childhood experience had sunk into my subconscious and was until not to appear again until the day the priest's prediction years later. Now once more it came to life as I looked into the divinity of Baba's loving eyes and knew that this was indeed the moment for renewing an age-old and sacred relationship. I knew that he knew all I yearned to say but could not utter. Later, I showed him to his rooms and sat beside him on the divan as I told him of the new members of our group and placed the house and our services at his disposal to be used by him as he deemed best. Only my words were spoken because Baba had been maintaining silence then for 7 years. Yet to my heart, he said many things, and on his little alphabet board, which Star read for me, he spelled out, I am so happy, I am very happy. His eyes were filled with tears which overflowed from a heart that knows only eternal love. I knew then that it was a momentous meeting, not only for me, but also for him, for reunion with his own is ever a joyous experience for the master. Suddenly, a cloud of concern passed over his happy face as he noticed my bandaged thumb. I had cut it deeply that evening with a bread knife. I wanted to know, he wanted to know how it had happened. I tried to make light of it as it deserved, but Baba insisted on knowing the details. Tenderly, he placed his hand over the bandage and spelled out on his alphabet board that it would be entirely healed by morning. It was. I mentioned this incident not only because it was in the nature of a minor miracle, but what is of greater importance because it exemplifies a fact which I have since had many opportunities to observe that no details of life that pertains to human need or suffering is too trivial or unimportant for Baba's merciful consideration. That no detail of life that pertains to human need or suffering is too trivial or unimportant for Baba's merciful consideration. Having heard that he usually had his meals alone in his room, I told Baba that I had made arrangements accordingly. He smiled his thanks, but indicated that this might this night he would have dinner with the group if he would like it. I assured him he would be delighted. We would be delighted. So for our first communal evening meal, communal uh, evening meal at Harman, Baba sat at the head of the long table, pouring out his silent benediction upon us all. This is no mere figure of speech. Baba's presence is so electric with spiritual charge that even to be in the same house with him and much more at the same table is a soul stirring experience. Slowly, his dark, luminous eyes passed from one face to another as we sat around the table, and I felt he was making a soul survey of the inner life of all of us. Yet nothing which he beheld in the chambers of our hearts brought any sign of condemnation or criticism to his countenance, only evidence of deep tolerance and understanding. Such a powerful sentence. Okay.
Yeah.
Before bidding us good night, he said he would see only the members of our group family the following day, and since I was keeper of the house, he would see me first. So the next morning after breakfast, while our friends waited eagerly in the room below, I went up to Baba's quarter. I felt I wanted only to be quiet in his presence, and for 5 wonderful minutes he let me sit silently with him. Then he asked, spelling out the words on his board, "What are you thinking about?" I could not put my thoughts into words. In truth, they were, I told Baba, too abstract even to recall. He replied, "You need not try. I know what you were thinking. I know what you thought yesterday, what you will think a year from now." For a long moment, I was speechless. Never before had I encountered such egoless omniscience. Yet I accepted his statement naturally, without question. The force of his pure integrity lay behind it. Then I found my voice. Is it because you see things whole unfettered by time? Is it because you see things whole unfettered by time? He nodded his confirmation. Again, I sat silent for a few moments before replying. This seems so familiar to be sitting here with you like this, Baba. I feel as if I had always done it. He assured me it was so. You are you have been with me for ages. By this time, the dissolving of my artificial shell was well underway, with no emotional appeal such as is inherent in the spoken word, but through the more penetrating influence of pure being. He had accomplished the initial untying of painful knots and bonds of egoistic self consciousness, fear, and ignorance. He left the room in tear purified tears. He left the room in
I
tears.
left.
Uh, I left the room in tears, purifying tears, in which joy and pain strangely mingle, unashamed tears which both humble and exalt one, both humble and exalt one. Later, the other members of our family kept their appointments with the master in the upper room, and without exception, they descended again to the world of everyday things in the same transport of inner release, back into a world which by now Baba's divine alchemy had transmuted into a realm of wonder and beauty. Baba's faculty of penetrating the mask of even the most sophisticated is due to his seeing the eternal self in people. Since this self is perfect in everyone, it naturally follows that Baba's calling it into consciousness of the individual by his spontaneous recognition of it causes many people to feel a temporary release from their everyday limited consciousness. I'll read it once again. Baba's faculty of penetrating the mask of even the most sophisticated is due to his seeing the eternal self in people. Since this self is perfect in everyone, it naturally follows that Baba's calling it into the consciousness of the individual by his spontaneous recognition of it causes many people to feel a temporary release from their everyday limited consciousness. Those whose egoistic vitality has been weakened by the impact of previous glimpses of higher consciousness or by the disciplinary hand of life experience feel a sublime joy mixed with a salutary kind of pain at the moment of meeting Baba. The mirror of perfection which he holds before their consciousness reinforces their intuition of the truth of themselves, in spite of contrasting anguish which their present limited awareness generates in them. Others, of course, who are deeply crystallized in their passions, desires, and opinions, resist this purging activity of God in their souls. This deflection of their self esteem causes them to turn from and often against Baba.
Deflation, yeah, deflation of their self-esteem.
Deflation. Yes.
We can wrap up here. Yeah, we can probably stop here. The next section may be longer. Yeah. Thank you so much for reading, Ashok ji and Mama ji. So interesting start to the book.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's a very soul-stirring story in the
Yes.
sense that so many different things come up in our mind. So the all encompassing predestined meeting arranged by Baba in all its aspects of material, worldly things to the inner attraction of the souls which were together for a long time earlier also. So all these things are brought out so very well here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this and Baba's visit in 1954 in Washington, where he was in a hotel. There was a dinner was given, and the movies are also available, as you must have seen.
Yeah.
So these two get together, so to say, where and also one in Italy later. There are many Baba lovers, Westerners Baba lovers met Baba for the first time, and it would be interesting to read their own accounts separately, because it is her, she is writing her own account, and many others also met during this 1931 Arman on the this Devonshire retreat. Arman was in US, sorry. So that's the first outpouring of love. That account is very interesting to read.
So this is
Absolutely, Sanjay. Thanks for
Yeah,
recommending.
many people went with questions. Many people went with questions, and they were lost. They couldn't even ask one. These kind of stories are there, many of them. Yeah, Jai Baba.
absolutely. So this
Absolutely,
is
Karthik. I want to add that it brings us to a new sort of a paradigm of experiences and real accounts of you know uh, the early years of Baba's advent.
Indeed, indeed. So I was just showing you where Harmon is. So Harmon on the Hudson is the name of the house. So that was my bad. So Harmon is upstate New York, not the city of New York. It's above New York. So
Yeah, it's
so
away. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
up north, and it's not downtown Manhattan, but that up there. So
Yeah,
just to
it
give you
is. It is in this part that you see extended towards the left, where Baba had landed in 1952. This is the old airport. The first airport used to be here. You know the
okay,
what it is called. I cannot read on this. This is Long Island. So
Long Island.
Baba
Oh,
had
okay, so
landed in Long Island. Long Island. Baba had landed when he went to Myrtle Beach. So
okay,
yeah, there is an account which we I think read somewhere, or I read
yeah,
maybe
yeah. So he took
separately.
the train from New
Yeah,
York. I
he
don't
landed
remember.
here. Yeah, he
Yeah,
landed
okay.
here actually. Yeah,
Not sure if Long Island has. Yeah, okay. It's one of the
it has an
boroughs of.
airport.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So
has an airport, Long Island
yeah.
Airport. Yeah.
No, but from the beginning, it was probably the JFK, which was the gateway, the big airport for international. So I
Yeah.
don't. Maybe he landed
No,
to
no,
JFK or somewhere
no,
else.
no, no. He landed here in 1952, and if you
Okay.
remember the pages
He took a
that we
train.
read, yeah,
Yeah.
Mehra's account also we read. One page was there when we read Myrtle story, which
Yes. Yes.
published in. There the account is there, which Mehra wrote that when we landed up in Long Island and what happened and all that. It is given in just one page,
Correct. Correct.
and we read it along with that account of development of Myrtle Beach.
True. 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 True.
Yeah, yeah.
Very nice. Lovely. So it's time to see the painting, Namita ji, before I end the recording. How far did you get in his love?
Sorry, Jai
You're on
Baba.
mute.
It's not a painting, but I was painting the dice. You know, can you see it?
Yeah.
The chessboard dice, they had gotten spoiled, so I'm repurposing them. I'm painting them.
Oh, okay. So I kind of assumed that you're doing some of these the
Baba painting.
beautiful Baba paintings. Yes, yes. That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
no, today I needed to. This has been on my to-do list for a long time. So, with Baba's grace and listening to such a beautiful narrative, I was able to do this.
Is it
Jai
a
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Jai Baba.
Jai,
I'll stop recording. We can